In Health Coaching and Beyond, Tim and I aim to mix up conversations between the two of us, chewing over hot topics, latest news and emerging ideas, but also bringing you conversations with thought leaders and people we admire in the field of health coaching and beyond. People we hope will help you think well and spark interesting ideas for yourself. This week, it was a real pleasure to host Tom Williams. He's been one of the major driving force behind parkrun's growth and success, having led the organisation from its fourth event up to its over 2,500th event. We discussed the magic combination of being outdoors, active and social, how parkrun's simplicity led to its scalability, and how having a bold vision and the determination to follow it through is key to achieving something incredible, even if it's just for a few people. We get on to talk about Tom's new venture, Participate World, an organisation that champions community sport, amongst other things celebrating the UK's unsung strength in this area and enabling community sport leaders to export their expertise. Tom is a force for good who thinks on a big scale, and I hope his ideas generate unprocessed thinking for you. To understand that phrase, you'll have to listen right to the end. Okay, welcome back, folks. It's lovely to have with me today Tom Williams, who I'm privileged to say has been a friend and a colleague and a collaborator over the years. So forgive me, Tom, I'll do a brief introduction. You can correct me if I've got anything wrong. But from what I know, you started as a lecturer in sport and exercise medicine at University of Leeds, 2006, 2010. You hit stardom with Marathon Talk podcast. You did for over 9 years with Martin Yelling, so you're a bit of a veteran in podcasting. But I think one of the really key things I've known you about is being the driving force, one of the driving force behind Parkrun. You joined them at very early stage. I think you set up the third Parkrun ever, the first one outside London. You were then the managing director, 2013 to 2016, and this chief operating officer, 2016 to 2023, and were really seminal in growing it from 3 to 2,500 events. So it'd be lovely to talk a bit about that. You've also got an honorary doctorate in sports science from Leeds Beckett University in 2024. You're a current non-exec director of the Jane Tomlinson Run for All Foundation, great charity. And most recently, you co-founded Participate World with your colleague Chris Lomax, where you champion community sport globally. Is that enough of an introduction, Tom? Anything you want to add?
No, that's cool. I think a couple of minor corrections. So fourth parkrun event, not third, and lecture in sport and exercise science, not sport and exercise medicine. But apart from that, Ollie, bang on.
Cool. There we go. So medicine on the brain. That's what happens with us GPs. Brilliant. Well, I mean, I'd love to start talking a little bit about parkrun because it really was a phenomenal thing. Still is a phenomenal thing, wasn't it?
Yes,
but you were really one of the driving forces between those early days, weren't you? And
thank you.
What do you think? What do you think it was that's made parkrun so successful?
I think all human beings have a innate need to be outdoors, active and social. I really do think every single one of us is wired to be outdoors, active and social. And I think that's kind of whole movement. You know, we've talked before, you and I think about kind of processed food, whole food, processed movement, whole movement, and the differences, you know, between those two things. And with whole food or whole movement, I don't think we really understand why is a carrot better than the constituent parts of a carrot in pill form or something? You know, why is whole food better? Why is whole exercise better? Why is going for a walk in the forest with your mate better than walking on a treadmill under artificial light on your own? And you know, we all have different maybe levels wired into us of how much we need to be outdoors or how much we need to be social. I'm not a massively social person, or how active we need, but I do think those three core ingredients are in everybody. And are a basic human need in everybody for kind of optimal human health. And I think Parkrun, you know, kind of stumbled on that as a framework for, hang on a minute, here's a really, really simple, scalable, sustainable framework that is prescriptive enough that it works and is repeats. You know, you set up Parkrun in Sheffield, Graves Parkrun, I set up Woodhouse Moor, they're still going, you know, well over a decade later, both of them. And because there's some prescriptive component, which is you have to do it like this, you have to do it every week, it has to be free, etc., etc. But there's enough flexibility there that if you want to just go and hang out, you can just go and hang out. My wife Helen is the event director of our junior parkrun. My favorite thing is to go and get coffee from the cafe and chat to some of my mates who are parents and
Yeah.
wander around and chat. And, whereas my kids might run or might volunteer, Helen loves volunteering. Some people like being social. But being in and around a group of people with a common goal outside, I think is really powerful. And I think parkrun just unlocked that. And when you think about that, if we reflect on that, how many opportunities are there in life, particularly in kind of modern society? How many opportunities are there in life for us to do that as a collective? And you can go and watch your son and daughter at the swimming club, or you can go and, you know, do something with somebody else, or I can go for a walk with my dad or something. But you can't. It's not unique, but it's almost unique, I would say, in that ability that actually I can go with my dad and my daughter, and we can all have that outdoors active social experience for free, really accessibly in our local park.
Yeah,
So
well, it's
yeah,
amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's surpassed 11 million registrants now worldwide, isn't it?
I
So
think did it
23,
go through 12 the other day? I think it went through 12 the other
12, did
day.
it really?
11 or
12
12,
million
yeah.
people in 23 different countries. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
something about it that's really caught the imagination of the world, really, isn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah, and I think it's that. I think it is that opportunity for, and it's a bit deeper than outdoors active social. Of course, with that comes a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Being part of something, and those are really wired into us as animals, as in the human species, as it were. And I think people, we know at Parkrun from the research, I still say we when I talk about Parkrun,
Mm.
they now in a way, but I mean, I still volunteer
Well, you're
sometimes.
still part of the
Um,
DNA, Tom, really, I
still
think, aren't
part,
you?
still part, still it's in there, it's wired in me somewhere. I think, we know people stay for a different reason for what they come. So often people come to lose weight or to get fitter or to beat their running PB or whatever.
Yeah.
And they usually stay for the community, for the sense of achievement, for the camaraderie, for the sense of purpose. So I think we often don't realize as human beings, we don't always do what's best for us. And we don't always know what we need, right? It's like when, you know, Chris and I have just been traveling a bit over the last few months, actually, and you're endlessly going through airports or we're going through train stations or whatever. And the temptation to take the escalator rather than the stairs is so powerful, even though we all know taking the stairs is better for us. We all know. And you make little excuses like, oh, my bag's really heavy. And it's not. And actually, carrying a heavy bag upstairs is really good for you.
Mhm.
And I think as humans, whether it's we could go out in the rain with a friend, but we're going to stay in and watch telly, or we could use the stairs, but we're going to go in the lift, or we don't always gravitate towards what is best for us and best for our health. I think naturally, I find that really hard myself, as you know, my kind of inner Homer Simpson. We used to joke about marathon talk, but yeah, I think it's often captured the world and captured people's imaginations because of that. You only have to go to a park run and see the impact it has on the people involved, and really importantly on the volunteers. The impact on an individual's health and well-being is greater, I'm pretty confident, if they volunteer than if they walk or run, and even greater if they do both. And that comes back to, well, it's an opportunity for purpose. It's an opportunity to contribute to your community. It's an opportunity to meet people in a non-awkward way, etc., etc. And those things are also missing from society these days.
So it's made it easier for people to do the right thing, like you say. That
Yeah.
sociability sustains it. Do you think there was a sort of gap in the market, or do you think there was something special about Parkrun that added something extra, or do you think it just there
Oh,
were
no.
people were missing the opportunity to do these sorts of things?
When Paul started Parkrun, he, and this is a very well known, his story is very well
Yes.
known, and he was going through a difficult time in his life and got injured and couldn't run, and running for him was the way to stay engaged with his community. That's the gap in the market, right? The gap in the market is,
Yeah.
oh, there isn't an easy way, and of course there are choirs and there are other interest groups and there are other things. Running isn't the be all and end all, but there actually aren't that many super accessible ways you can kind of turn up unannounced in a park and hang out with some friends in a no pressure environment. You don't need any skill or training or equipment or anything, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think that back in 2004 when Paul started Park Run, that was the gap in the market. What do you do if you haven't got a club or group that you're part of and you're going through a bit of a difficult time in life? Who do you reach out to? And so often great inventions, I think, come from somebody solving their own problem,
Yes.
and then it turns out loads of other people had that problem.
Yes, and I was hearing you talk about it, and I've heard you talking about it before, and I know Paul, and I know yourself, and you're always very modest about this, that you sort of discovered it. It's almost like you sort of stumbled on it to a degree, and it makes me sort of think that's almost It's a parallels to
Mm.
coaching and to how,
Yep.
it's not always about having a grand strategy and a grand plan. Sometimes you just discover what's right, and once you find it, I think the thing that you and Paul really did was you thought you realized it. You when you
Yeah.
saw it, you thought, hey, there's something here. Let's keep pushing at this. Let's see how far we can take it.
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly right. I work with organisations now that have lots of community support organisations who they've got an amazing idea. They're probably achieving amazing impact at a relatively small level. Often, they want to impact as many people as possible
Yeah,
because they want to share that amazing joy. I'm sure you're the same with health coaching. I was the same
absolutely.
with parkrun, etc., etc. God, this is great. I get so much from making someone's life better. How can I make more people's lives better?
Yeah.
And I think where that can fall down sometimes is you can't be all things to all people. And I think one of the things there are probably a few key elements that we sort of got right. And one of the big things was working out what's important, what cannot change, what's fixed, and where can we be flexible. And actually, we weren't flexible about a huge amount, but I think that's you come under immense pressure. Oh, could we do one on a Wednesday? Oh, could we
Mm.
do one that's 10K? Oh, could we do one every month? Could we change the start time? Could we this? Could we that? And we were under immense pressure for a long time to change things and fiddle with things and the fact we didn't meant that if you turn up on the South Island in New Zealand, or you go to a township in South Africa, or you go to the Falkland Islands, or you go to Pocketten Parkrun, the most northerly one in Finland,
Hmm.
or the other ones, you kind of know what you're going to get, and people are benefiting from the framework
Yeah.
of this is how it works. Just trust us. This is how it works. You can't do it differently. This is how it works.
It's great that, and I could listen to you all day about that. But it sounds like that consistency in sticking to what you were really good at that really made it successful in a lot of ways. But and I will get off part run in a minute but I'm so interested in this
It's
because
good.
it's
That's good.
But what you said there also reminded me of when I was working with you that you shifted it, didn't you? Well, I remember at
Mm,
one point
mm.
saying your mission was a free 5K run in every park that wants one, and that was your
Yeah.
standard mission. But then at some point you shifted your mission to a bit more grandiose, a healthier and happier planet.
Very often you hear organizations, they have mission statements that they don't really live up to, and they don't kind of uh abide by them, and it's not really what they do, and it's just words on, how often do you, we're going to be this and we're going to be that, and they not and they aren't. I've always felt it was really important to have, for part one at least, to have a very powerful mission. This is what every decision we make every day is based on. And for a long time, it was a park run in every town in the world was the kind of the phrase we rolled out.
Yeah.
And that was driven by Paul's desire in the very early days for that to be the case. And I when I first started talking to him in 2007. And I asked him what his vision was. That was his vision. Wouldn't it be great? And I think he only had up to three, one, two, or three events at that when I first spoke to him. Probably had two events when I first spoke to him in West London. And he said, wouldn't it be great if there was one of these in every town in the world? And, it's a ridiculous vision, and you need a ridiculous vision, right? To
Yeah.
achieve ridiculous things. We had a bit of a review, and I think it was, our old CEO, Nick Pearson, I think he was the first person that kind of pointed it out when he came on board as CEO in about, I want to say 2015.
Mm.
And he said, I don't think the mission statement's right. I think he also said, I don't think it's ambitious enough, to which I said, hang on a minute, one in every town in the world. But he said, his point was, we're not making decisions based on every town in the part one everywhere somebody wants one. We're making decisions based on health and happiness. And what that meant was, we had turned down, I won't name them necessarily, but we turned down a sponsor with a significant offer, financial offer of sponsorship, because we didn't think that they would have a positive health impact
Mm.
on our community. That wasn't a decision based on a park run everywhere somebody wants one. That absolutely helps us to put a park run where somebody wants one. That X amount of money, it was a lot of money, would allow us to start a load of park runs. So that was counter to that mission statement, but it was positive toward a mission statement that was more centered around health and happiness. And that was the point where we said, okay, let's change into a healthier, happier planet. And then at that point, we were making decisions, starting in prisons, for example.
Yeah.
is a decision about making a healthier and happier planet, and that's a way of prioritizing the things we did every single day. So yeah, it was a really important, I thought, and powerful change in our mission, and one that guided us through a whole lot of things. I know you were heavily involved with the social prescribing, parkrun practices, partnership
Yeah.
with Royal College of General Practitioners, where
Yeah.
you were actually, I think we found, I mean, you were closer to it than me probably, but we found that actually a load of health practitioners were prescribing parkrun to their patients for various reasons, often for
Mm.
loneliness and social isolation more than lack of physical activity. And so, hang on a minute, and I think Chrissy again drove this work. Like, hang on a minute, that's a great opportunity. What if we could formalize that and encourage GP practices to advise their patients to come to parkrun? Incredible in your setting, particularly because you were also going to be there, as were your amazing practice
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah.
But that's not founded in a park run if somebody wants one. That's founded in making the planet healthier and happier.
Yeah, again, it's another example, isn't it, really, of where the sort of an association sort of emerged out of a natural fit. And then it was just a
Absolutely.
case of pushing on that door, wasn't it? And it took people with drive like Chrissy to go, hang around, let's grow this. Let's really
Yeah.
purposefully push this out. And I think, I mean, I'd love to talk more about parkrun, but we must get on to community sports as well. But I just think it's been fantastic how parkrun's grown and that shift to a healthier, happier planet. It's been great. It's led to all the work around park walk and inclusion and making sure that people with long-term conditions can join in the parkrun practice, like say the junior parkrun, the schools, Twinnings now. There's been some amazing stuff. So thanks, Tom, for everything you and co have done there and the legacy you've left. But maybe we should switch to community sport because you've
Yeah.
taken a lot of what you've learned in parkrun and you've put it into this new initiative now, haven't you, to develop community sport. And
Yes.
what I've heard is, you help sport leaders to share their knowledge, help communities and governments around the world to benefit from community sport and the diplomacy angle of that. But where do you want to take this? Tell me. You started it last year. You and Chris, someone from the Foreign Office. Chris is, isn't he? So
Yeah.
what's your ambition? Where are you taking it?
Yeah. Okay. It's been an incredible year. We started together in January last year, and Chris is my next door neighbour.
It
And
was a plan hatched over a garden fence, eh?
it was, yeah. I was over. Have you got a phone number for a renderer? It was the actual initial conversation. But I mean, Chris is an incredible individual and this is a really good thing. He comes from an entirely different background to me.
Yeah.
So, he's in mind. He was first one to say he's not sporty. I've still not gotten to a park run, amazingly. But he's unbelievably passionate about making the world a better place, as I am. And he spent 20 years as a UK diplomat, 12 years of that as part of the UK mission to the UN advisory on human rights. He got an MBE for preventing mass genocide in South Sudan. I think he encouraged countries to accept investigations into war crimes they'd possibly committed or crimes against humanity. I mean, Chris is in that kind of world of trying to make the world a better place. We really both felt a passion for utilizing community sport as a tool for global good, or enabling community sport to contribute to the world in a more powerful way, because we just both felt so passionately about the opportunities associated with community sport. And so we started working together in January, and we're combining my sort of operational sport development experience through taking parkrun across 23 countries and everything we learned on that very long journey, with Chris's kind of diplomatic and strategic skills and all of that ability to try and support community sport in the UK and around the world. One part is we advise governments and large organizations on the delivery of large-scale community sport initiatives, and trying to advise them using my experience from parkrun about scale and simplicity, and the importance of how you create something that's so simple, because without the simplicity, but still great, but without the simplicity, you just will not achieve scale, whoever you are. Then there's the second part of what we do, is we're developing what we're calling an incubator stroke accelerator program for community sport organizations. So I felt when I was at Parkrun that we were successful largely in spite of the establishment, the organizations that were meant to help us.
Right.
there was no real effective support. There were no organisations really helping us with complex problems. And one of the things is when you're growing something new, you are finding new problems. But what
Yeah.
you need somebody that says, you know what, talk me through your problem. I'll talk you through some of mine that might have been similar, and let's work together to work out your solution to your problem, to help you work out your solution to your problem, but kind of aligning them with the experience that I've had or someone else has had or someone else has had. A lot of it is giving people the confidence to believe in what they believe in, that dream. I would sound like, is it
Yeah.
Simon
Yeah.
Scribb now? What's your dream? But we've worked with 7 or 8 community sport organisations, giving them our support for free, finding
Yeah.
out what works, what doesn't. How can we help? How do we not? How do we get things out of my head? And it's not all about me, but the kind of the concept is sort of in my head. How do we get it out of my head and turn it into something formalised? What we need is a program that says, you know what, actually, we're going to identify the challenges that your community sport organisation are facing, and if one of them is actually coaching, then that's okay. Well, let's get someone like Ollie Hine or whoever to come in and help and guide that person. But if it's
Yeah.
data capture, let's get somebody else to help. Or if it's such and such, let's get somebody else to help. But let's create this environment whereby the next generation of community sport leaders have a supportive arm around them that says, believe in your dreams, we can help you do it, you can achieve it. Nobody, Parkrun has now delivered something like 145 or 150 million instances of participation. I think later this year, I think they will deliver their 1 millionth event, like not instance of participation,
Yeah.
event. Now,
Yeah.
anybody with a sane mind would have said that was impossible. And so we're working on that. And then the third and kind of final piece is where that's being led a bit more by me. And then the third piece is inspired a lot by Chris and I's attempts to take part to Uganda. And where we felt, Chris was the head of the Horn of Africa unit for the Foreign Office at the time, and kind of responsible for UK foreign policy in that part of the world. And he really felt passionately, as I did, that actually if we could grow parkrun across whatever 500 or 1,000 locations across that part of Africa, we could have a massively important, powerful, and positive impact on a really important part of the world. And at the same time, we could also, that's a great thing for the UK to do. Remember, Chris was still technically, is in many ways, a UK diplomat.
Yeah.
That also is a great thing for the UK to be involved in as a force for good in the world. And let's get the UK really known for doing great things. And of course, community sport, is an amazing thing in the UK, but it's massively undervalued. It's undervalued internally in the UK. It's under-supported. It's under-recognised, and we need to come together. And you've been involved in some of this work of bringing together a collective of community sport leaders to champion community sport and become real ambassadors for community sport in the right way. But also, it's not recognised. I don't think. Well, it's definitely. I don't think. I know it's nowhere near well enough recognised. In fact, it's totally unrecognised as a force for global good. We now sit on the UK government's working group for sport diplomacy, so we sit alongside Premier League, Formula One, Wimbledon, the RNA, ECB, and Laureus, and on and on. And we're really trying to champion community sport within that sport diplomacy world, and we're feeding into the UK government's sport diplomacy strategy and so on. So hopefully we can
Fantastic.
we can do both things. Like at one end, we can really help community sport organisations
Right.
grow and be sustainable and be successful, and at the other end, we can champion them for a force for global good, and we can
Yeah.
support them in operating around the world.
I think
So
that's amazing,
yeah.
and I think that's really unique about bringing out community sport as a sort of diplomatic tool, really,
Mm,
but
mm,
but also recognizing it's one of our great strengths as a country, one of our great exports, if you like, really, and that
absolutely.
you've discovered that you can push on that, you can give it a nudge and really accelerate it and try and make it bigger. I
Oh, go
wonder
on.
we should define community sport, because
That's a good
we've sort of
shout.
almost been implicit in what we've said, isn't it? But I bet
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
got a
yeah.
really good definition up your sleeve of what community sport means.
I think one of the important things is, yes, it can sit within the typical pyramid of sport that we see in this country. So my son plays grassroots football for a kids under 12s team.
Yeah.
That's definitely community sport. Like, I'm one of the coaches, everybody mucks in. It's proper community sport. And that's part of this pyramid, and it falls under the FA, and it goes all the way up to the Premier League and the World Cup and the Champions League and all that kind of stuff. However, there is a huge swathe of unbelievable community sport. They're not part of that pathway. They're not part of that pyramid. And I think whether it's This Woman Runs, who we're working really closely with, or it's Brighton Table Tennis Club, or it's Park
Yes.
Yoga. It's
Yeah.
definitely not what we would consider a traditional sport.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something to be said for its community, it's movement. It's like community sport. Maybe it's community movement is better. There's some kind of physical activity component within it.
And
Um,
so it can be a wide definition of sport, but also the community aspect. Is it the fact that you're doing it with a large group of people, or is it in the setting that you're doing it, or a bit of each? Yeah.
look, it's another great shout, Ollie. I think for me, this is just my
Yeah. No.
interpretation. Going back to what I really believe in, which is we need to be outdoors, active, and social.
Yeah.
I think for it to be effective, I really think you need to be doing it with other people. And I don't think it means you're a large group of people, right? So I think you could do
Yeah.
community sport, could be, me and my mum going out for a walk together in some way, or whatever it
Mm.
might be. So I don't think it has to be overly social or overly large, and you can get scale from lots of instances of something happening in small groups, right? But I think being outdoors, active, and social
Yeah.
is absolutely critical.
It's hard to define then, Tom, isn't it? But it sounds to me there's something about sort of, using sport, activity, movement, in a sort of combination with other people for a sense of sort of positive purpose and to drive something that's more than the sum of its parts, if you like, really.
Absolutely. That'll
Yeah.
that'll do. Very
Yeah,
concise
that'll do.
definition,
Okay,
Ollie.
yeah, let that one down. Put it on my name. But I mean, a lot of the people that listen to this will be obviously interested in health coaching, and
Yeah.
I can see quite a lot of parallels between what you're doing with community sport. I mean, the clue is in your name, isn't it? Participate
Mm,
world,
mm.
people joining in, and I think a key theme of health coaching, health and well-being coaching, is building people's sense of self-belief, as you said, building their sense
Absolutely.
of agency and autonomy, making them believe they can when perhaps they thought they couldn't. And it seems like those are sort of quite key themes in what you're doing. So, I mean, how do you see health coaches could potentially join in what you're doing with community sport?
So much. I think almost everything we do is in some way about coaching, right? And
Yeah.
so, and not wanting to make it all about Sheffield, but I remember, and I can't remember her name. I really apologise, but the lady who was event director of Sheffield Castle Park Run a long time ago told me this story about it's quite a hilly park run,
Mm.
and this chap had come along to do it and had never done it. Was about nervous about doing it, and was worried about running up the hill and said, "Oh, I'm a bit worried about running up that hill." Um, I think he'd said, can I practice it or could I do it separately?
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
you show me where it is?" And she helped him, and he said he'd never run up a hill before,
Yeah. Amazing.
and she'd helped him like in his life. Like, I mean,
Mm.
must have done as a kid, surely, and forgotten, but
Mm.
but like he says, never done that before. And she told me, and she's just this incredible local volunteer. Health coaching is not what she does as a job or anything like that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
she's an amazing community leader. And she'd kind of sort of held his hand, as it were, metaphorically held his hand, helping him run up a hill for the first time in his life, and then had gone off and done park run, and he was away. And that's health coaching at its purest. I imagine, you would say, is
Yeah, do you
actually
know, I
saying,
think you're
like,
talking about Dawn there, who was one of
yes,
the
that's right, that's
leaders
right.
of the social prescribing group there, Manor and Castle Development Trust. And
Yes.
yeah, Sheffield has an amazing legacy of community trusts,
Mm.
voluntary anchor organisations who are natural coaches. So we're building. It's a bit like the theme you talked about with Parkrun, isn't it? We're not necessarily creating something new. We're just shining a spotlight on something we've forgotten about or not given enough attention to, and
Yeah,
actually think, come on, these flames need to be fanned here, and if they do, it's going to be positive for all of us.
absolutely. And I think, if you can change someone's behavior outside of the time you're with them, right? That's in every single thing we do. There was a weird, we had in a park we operate in Abu Dhabi, or there was a chap who's a security guard there, and I went to the park for the first time about 6 months ago, and wandering around the park, taking some pictures of the park with a few other people, and
Mm,
the security guard was very suspicious of what we're doing. Why are you
mm,
filming in this park? Have you got permission, etc., etc.? And it was fine, but it was a kind of a slightly awkward, slightly tense exchange. And now they have a run there on a Saturday morning. It's called Run With Us. It's really, really nice. And he started finishing his shift early and running in his uniform
mhm.
at that 5K run afterwards. And
Wow.
that's that's a form of coaching where those volunteers, they're there every week and they're chatting and they're making friends and they're encouraging a behavior change. And why don't you come and join us? And over a period of weeks and weeks and weeks, that's turned somebody who was maybe a bit nervous about what was going on, a bit standoffish, not part of that community, and they've been kind of welcomed into that community, and they've joined that community, and now they're away. Maybe that is really what community sport is, right? Going back to what's the definition of community sport, maybe it really is community health coaching in a way. It's empowering people to
Yeah.
empower other people. We're
Yeah.
you know
That's that. Maybe that you're right. And this, I've just thought one last thing I want to just sort of ask you about. It kind of draws parallels between Participate World and what you do with Parkrun. And I guess some people might criticise perhaps the sort of ethics of going to places like the Middle East, where
Mm,
perhaps some of their human rights sort of history isn't great. Where their sort of gender issues have been really poor. Sort of their approach to homosexuality and so on. And I remember in Parkrun as well, there was always this feeling, wasn't there? You're just creating something for the people who are already fit already. You're just creating another opportunity for
yeah.
people that have already got something. And so you've often worked at that edge there, haven't you, where you've kind of had to sort of accept, are we going to tolerate some flexibility here for the greater good in the long run? I don't know if you want to speak to that, because I know it's something you feel
Yeah.
quite passionate about.
Yeah, I do feel really passionate about it. And I think that, people in every country in the world are inherently good. Not everybody is.
Yeah.
Often leaders aren't. Rules, regimes, even cultures don't always represent the people as you find them. And I always believe in kind of treating people as you find them. And I think, I learned that, well, I've learned that so many times in life in many ways, but one example through Parkrun might be when I was lucky enough to go to Parkrun when it was in Russia a few times, and I spent a lot of time with the Parkrun community in Russia, and we closed Parkrun when Putin invaded Ukraine. But I had a couple of trips out there, and there were issues there with lots of things, obviously well-known issues around
Yeah.
various human rights stuff and so on. But when you went to parks and open spaces in Russia and you spent time with the local people, they were no different. Park runners in Russia were no different to park runners in Sheffield. And they really weren't. I mean, they were incredibly welcoming, incredibly open. So when Chris and I were working together, and when I was looking to take Parkrun to Uganda in 2024, lots of people understandably had concerns about things like the LGBT laws in Uganda, which are terrible or which are abhorrent. They had concerns about other things around things like gender-based violence or corruption or whatever it was. But, Chris and I felt and still feel very strongly that actually, one, people are generally really good.
Yeah.
So and laws in a country don't necessarily reflect the people and the feeling of people.
Yeah.
And two, I think we want to go and contribute to the world positively. And I don't think the way to do that is to wait for country such and such to behave like you do. Well, we'll come and work with you when you behave like we do.
Mm.
I don't think, for me, that's one. I think that's fundamentally, I don't think that's right. I'm not sure we should impose all of our values on everybody else. And think about, if we all want to contribute to the world and play our part in making the world more tolerant, more friendly, more accepting, more inclusive, more community based, reducing conflict, reducing negativity. I feel really comfortable going to places and trying to bring people together.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Well, as far as I've known you, you've always been ambitious and bold about your pursuit of being a force for good. I'm really grateful for that, Tom. I know it probably comes at a lot of cost having these dreams and these grand ideas, but it's fantastic to see what you've done and to see what you're still doing. And I know Participate World like Parkrun will turn into a force for good. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts today. It's been a
Thank you,
great
Ollie.
conversation, and thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute honor to be back on a podcast and your podcast.
Yes.